Today I'm going to be rebuilding a carburetor on a Yamaha TTR-50. This electric start motorcycle here, and I just wanted to go through it with you. As you're going to be able to see in this carburetor, it's extremely filthy, corroded, and has some parts that are destroyed. I just wanted to give you a general idea how to clean a carburetor. I'm going to do this video anyways. We've got our choke cable on here. We've got our knob that would run up to the handlebars here, and we've got the cable that runs all the way down. Your plunger sits down in here. It's a Phillips screw to remove the clamp that holds that plunger in. So if you take that clamp off of there, pull that plunger off of there, that cap, it's got an O-ring right here that you want to inspect, make sure it's in good working condition so it seals properly. As you can see, when we pull that knob there, it raises that plunger. So that is allowing more fuel and air to flow into your motor, helping start your motorcycle there. So that's the choke assembly. We're going to set that aside now as we go through the rest of the carburetor. We've got where your fuel comes in is here, so your fuel tank, it will sit up here. A fuel line will run down into this port here, down into your bottom bowl area there. We've got your overflow nipple here. The fuel's bouncing around in your carburetor. Fuel will dump out through an overflow tube that I'll show you in your bottom bowl area and come out this port here. That being said, you want to make sure that you've got a fuel line hooked up to this nipple here on the bottom of your carburetor so that fuel isn't directly dumping onto your motor. It'll just discolor your motor and cause some damage. We've got your throttle cable, your slide, and a cap with a spring on it that'll sit down in here. That's going to slide all the way down. If you twist your throttle, it's going to raise that slide up, allowing more air to flow through your venturi here, allowing more fuel to get sucked up through your bottom bowl here. So that cap and slide and needle will typically stay on your motorcycle unless you're needing to replace some of those parts or you're needing to clean those parts. Generally, those parts are easy enough to clean when they're on the bike. You can just take carbon choke cleaner, spray those off really well, clean them off with compressed air, and they'll be ready to go back together. Your bottom bowl here is 4 screws, as these are very fine threaded screw going into an aluminum carburetor, and they strip really easily. You can easily over tighten them. They don't actually have to be extremely tight just because of the size of them. And they've got an O-ring underneath of this bowl here that does a very, very good job of sealing things up. So as you can see, the corrosion here, it's in rough condition. And we've got an O-ring that's actually just non-existent. So make sure, typically you'd have an O-ring that sits in this groove here all the way around. Just might want to make sure that that's cleaned out really well and replaced if you've got it with a new carb kit. Here's your overflow tube that I'm talking about there. You can take a screw out here that'll allow fuel to, you can drain your carburetor, drain your bowl this way. If you undo this screw that's in here, it'll also run out your bottom nipple here. But when fuel is sloshing around and on the back of a trailer or pickup, fuel will bounce around in this carburetor and it'll go through your overflow tube there. I've got our float here. We've got our pilot jet, and as you can see, our main jet is missing. This main jet is a little bit larger orifice jet. It's about, I would say, 1/4 inch long, very, very small, a lot smaller in height compared to our pilot jet, but the orifice is going to be larger. Your pilot jet here is actually what your motorcycle uses when sitting there idling. So typically, if your bike is hard to start or does not idle, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be this pilot jet is gummed up. You can take compressed air then, remove this jet, take compressed air and blow through it. You do want to make sure that you can see through it when you're holding it up to light. If you need to soak it in carbon choke cleaner, you can do that as well. Right now, we're going to take this float off here. There's a pin that sits through here. You can take a needle or a pick and push this tab out. I would not suggest putting a lot of pressure on here. These posts can break very, very easily. If they do that, you're replacing that carburetor. Take a small pair of pliers or a small pair of side dikes. Just kind of work that pin out. Just being careful you don't break it off there. It'll only go one direction. It's got a plate on here to keep it from sliding all the way through. So Once you pull that out, then you can pull your float out. You do want to make sure that you put that in the right direction. The other thing, this is an adjustable float to where you can adjust this tab up or down depending on what your four-wheeler needs. If you're constantly leaking fuel, your needle and seat are good and possibly have been replaced, you may need to adjust your float height here. Also, your manual will tell you a float height that you can measure and determine if your float height is correct. This just when your your carburetor sits like this, obviously, so I'm going to give it a side view. Your fuel is going to dump into your carburetor. It works exactly the same as a toilet does. When water fills it up, it's going to push this float up. It's going to shut this valve off there, that needle valve there, and it's going to no longer let fuel in there. If that needle valve leaks or that seat leaks there, then it's going to constantly be letting fuel in. Or if this float is not set correctly, it's going to constantly be letting fuel in. It's going to go through that overflow there. If that's cleaned out, if it's not cleaned out, it's going to go directly into your motor and cause some damage there. So you want to make sure that fuel and seat are in the correct position. Make sure that this float height is the correct height. To get your needle out, typically it would just fall out. This one, as you can tell, is gummed up and pretty damaged. You do want to replace that needle if it's damaged at all, and this one's severely damaged. To replace your seat there, grab a Phillips screwdriver, turn this keeper out, will come undone, then this seat will just pull right out. So it's pretty simple to replace. A lot of times your jet kits will include those. We have got a air fuel screw on this Carb as well as the idle adjust, and they both sit over here. They're both flathead screws, and they both can be mistaken for each other. Your idle screw is going to go directly into your slide area there, your slide tube here. And what that's going to do, if you turn this in clockwise, it's going to turn your idle up. What that's doing is taking and pushing against that slide, raising that slide, allowing more air to flow through there. I don't suggest adjusting this more than a quarter turn at a time, and you want to make sure that your bike is good and warmed up. Make sure that your choke is off. Make sure your pilot jet is cleaned out before you adjust this idle at all. What could potentially happen is you adjust this too high, your kid is out there riding your bike, doesn't idle down, continues to go even when they let off the throttle. So you want to make sure that that's adjusted correctly. The other thing, you've got an air fuel screw over here. This can affect how the bike runs, could possibly change it. Definitely will change this depending on altitude, but riding conditions, you can sometimes change your air fuel screw here. This is determined by the number of screws out, number of turns out that this screw is on. So right now I'll show you, we'll count them going in. So we're going to count them from completely seated. So I'm going to turn it in just to see how far out we were. Half turn. Okay, about one turn out is what we were. Typically it's going to be about 1.5 to 2.5 turns out. So I'm going to adjust it. Actually, I'm going to pull it all the way out. Your manual will tell you exactly what it needs to be, and I can double check those settings for you. I'm going to pull those out right now so you can see what it looks like. It's just a very fine tipped screw there, and then down. And sometimes these don't like to come out, but there's an O-ring down there, and then also a metal washer that can be replaced. A lot of times will come with your jet kit. So going back together, then you're going to do O-ring, then you're going to do metal washer, then you're going to do spring, and then you're going to do your air fuel screw there. Again, turn it all the way completely seated, and we'll just do a turn and a half out since that's typically about what they should be. Half turn, 1.5. That's a turn and a half out. I'm going to flip this upside down now. We're going to put our bottom bowl components back in, put our needle back in there, take our float, make sure that's going the right direction, take our pin there, push that in through there, make sure everything's lined up. You can take pliers and kind of push it in there. Again, being really careful. I like to use small pliers so you don't have a lot of leverage to break those posts off. Again, make sure you check this O-ring there. You want to check and make sure your jets are in. So we've got our pilot jet there that, again, you want to make sure is just in good condition and completely cleaned out. Make sure you can see through there. If we had a main jet, we would put that in at this time. We've got our bowl here that you want to make sure is cleaned off. Inspect our O-ring, replace that if we've got it. and this bottom bowl will only go one direction. Set it on there. You want to make sure that these two that are raised will slide into place there. Make sure this tab here goes up into this area here. And then we can put all 4 of our Phillips screws back on. We'll go ahead and snug those 4 Phillips screws up. Again, before this goes on any motorcycle, if it ever goes on a motorcycle, it will need to be completely cleaned and gone through again. We have got a little heat switch here. This just warms this carburetor up slightly before you start your motorcycle. So it's just with the battery, with the electric start, the battery is just constantly, when you turn that key on, will warm that carburetor up just slightly, but it does allow fuel to flow through there a little easier. Just kind of gets things a little bit warmer than they would be if you got a completely cold motorcycle there. So that is the carb clean and inspection. Kind of just gone through it again. It's not a great carburetor, not a great video to show you when that carburetor is so filthy and corroded, but I wanted to give you an idea what that carb looks like and how to go through that. So if you've got questions or comments, make sure and leave those below. If this video has been helpful, please like and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button on the bottom right hand corner of this video. Appreciate you guys watching.